my name is Aaron Puckett, and for this library assignment, I chose to read Pride of Baghdad by Brian K. Vaughan. Here's the cover, but before I get into the story, I would like to introduce you to the creative team behind the novel. This is Brian K. Vaughan, the writer. He's a quite popular comic storyteller, but he also crosses over into TV. He was a staff writer for the hit show Lost from Season 3 to Season 5, which he received a lot of praise for his work on. I personally believe the final season would have been a bit better if they kept him on, but I'm not going to open that can of worms. Moving on, his TV credits continue as the showrunner for Under the Dome, an adaptation of Stephen King's novel by the same name. The next team member is the artist Nico Henrichon. I'm not 100% sure I'm pronouncing his name correctly, so I apologize if I've gotten it wrong, but he's a very well-established artist who has worked for both Marvel and DC. I have to say I really like his work. To me, his art is the perfect blend of realism and cartoon. You'll see the art from Pride later in this video, but here's a couple prints of his work on Spider-Man. The final member of the team is the letterer Todd Klein, a guy who has won both the Eisner Award and the Harvey Award in comics, not only multiple times, but consecutively. He also writes for DC sometimes. Lastly, Pride of Baghdad was published by Vertigo, an imprint of DC Comics responsible for such titles as Lucifer, Unfollow, and Frostbite. Now, since we have covered the creators of this work, it's time to talk about the work itself. Pride of Baghdad is an actual graphic novel. It's 138 pages, all published at once, not a collection of comic issues sold to the public as a graphic novel. The story follows a pride of 4 lions who escaped from the Baghdad Zoo during the U.S. invasion of the city in 2003. I really like that Vaughn's inspiration for this story came from actual events. Even more so, I like the fact he anthropomorphized all the animals and made the lions the central characters of the story. I think a story about this event could have easily been about the group of soldiers who encounter the pride, but I don't think the ending would have held as much weight or made the same statement. There are 4 main characters or members of the pride who escape the zoo, 2 lionesses, 1 lion, and 1 male cub. They all are thoroughly developed through their interaction with each other and other animals. There's even a flashback that shows a rape scene to explain why one of the lionesses doesn't want to leave the zoo with the pride. However, in my opinion, there seems to be only one real character arc, which is the cub. He begins as a cub who was born in captivity and had never seen a sunset, which changes at the end after the pride's journey through the city. There are changes within the other members of the pride, such as the lioness who finally decides to leave the zoo with the group, and the change in hostility between the 2 lionesses, with one eventually giving her life for the other and her cub, but other than that, the characters stay pretty static throughout. Moving on to the structure of the story, it has a clear beginning, middle, and end, but I don't think it follows the act structure of 1/4, 1/2, 1/4. This spread on pages 49 and 50 is when the pride is leaving the zoo and symbolizes the end of Act 1. Now I could see some people arguing the end of Act 2 comes when the lions defeat the bear. It is the part of the story I feel that builds the most suspense, but honestly, I think, and I apologize for the spoiler if you don't already know what happens with the story, I think the end of Act 2 comes when the pride is killed by the group of American soldiers. The reason I think this is because the pride leaves the zoo to be free and return to the wild. But it doesn't seem like they've completed this task until they are sitting on a rooftop watching the horizon as the sun sets, which is around page 120. It is at this moment the pride is fired upon by the American soldiers. The way Vaughn writes this story, a bullet comes out of nowhere and hits the lion. The lionesses are confused and do not know what is happening until they see a group of keepers, which is what the pride refers to humans as. It is at this point one of the lionesses start an attack to allow the other lioness and her cub to get away. But obviously this doesn't happen. Now when the soldiers approach, we can read their dialogue, which makes it seem like the group didn't have a choice, that they had to shoot the lions because they were attacking. I didn't know what to make of this at first because earlier in the story, if you'll remember back to the tank photo I showed, human dialogue didn't make sense. I think the switch to comprehensible English on the soldiers' part has to do with Vaughn's statement about the Iraq War, which is America should have never entered into it. It was a war that could have been avoided, just like killing the Pride of Lions. Since we have discussed the story and its components, I'm going to move on to a few topics that only apply to the medium of comics and graphic novels. First is the mini-comic idea. For the most part, I don't think Pride of Baghdad really uses this notion. Most of the action is spread across 4, 5, even 6 pages. I found myself in many instances hurrying to flip the page opposed to feeling like the action had ended and I was moving to another part of the scene. The next topics are transition and directional flow. It's very easy for the audience to know when they are. And when I say this, I'm referring more to the time of day, because this story takes place all in one day, and we can see the background color change. It starts off bright like morning and continues this way until the evening. Then the color changes to a deep orange, which is something I really like about the graphic novel medium. Now concerning the directional flow of the panels, it's very easy to follow. Most of the panels are broken up into segments, each with its own outline, and the first one in the top left corner is either angled or a bit different, so it pulls the eye. After that, the dialogue blocks pull the reader in the direction they should be reading, and the motion is almost seamless. This concludes my analysis of Pride of Baghdad. I have to say that I think everyone should give it a read. It only takes about an hour, maybe, not even that, if you don't want to take your time and look at all the drawings, which you should. They're really good. Henry Schoen does an amazing job. Overall, I really recommend this book. Of course, there's a few details that bother me, like the antelopes being inside of the lions, and the lions can see them. So why wouldn't the lions go crazy in the zoo? And then the turtle being in the tigress and all that. But overall, everyone should really read this.